Illinois to unveil culturally responsible standards for public school teachers, which treat teachers like criminals, serious criminals, and students like lab experiments. And to think how excited everyone is for the reopening of the schools. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness of back to K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we head to the land of Lincoln. I guess we're going to have to cancel that, right? The land of Pocahontas, where, under the guise of culturally responsive teaching and learning standards, Illinois teachers will soon be forced to teach progressive political orthodoxy or lose their license. This is one of the most significant stories we've ever done in the Dr. Duke Show, because this is telling you what's happening. If Illinois, not California, Massachusetts, or New York, if Illinois adopts these standards, you know within 6 months they will be all over the country. It is an absolute guarantee. And what this culturally responsible teaching means is that every teacher, every white teacher, must recognize their racism, must atone publicly for their racism, must spend their career not teaching subject matters, but finding ways to account for and make up for the horrible racism and bias that they're bringing to the campus. And the students are treated as lab rats, literally. They are little bodies, little minds that have to be programmed from top to bottom to recognize the evil of white people, the evil of white culture. This is I'll say it again, this is one of the most dangerous things that has come down the pike in a long time. And you know how it works. Even if somehow Illinois is able to fight back, somebody in Illinois is able to fight back against this. This is what the progressive left has in store for you down the road as public school citizens, kids who go to public school. There's no way, a way out of this unless you just remove those kids now. And
this is proposed for their standards to be, but If you know anything about Illinois, everything is ruled in Cook County.
Chicago.
And everyone downstate is just
screwed,
left to twiddle their thumbs and be told by their overlords what's happening. So these proposed standards probably will become their standards. And if you take a look at the actual bill, you can find it online. It is 11 pages telling exactly what it is that you teacher, if you want to be a teacher in Illinois, you must bow down and do. In the little description they have of the subjects and issues involved, they say this rulemaking will incorporate culturally responsive teaching and leading, CRTL, standards into Illinois preparation programs. The standards were developed by the state's diverse and learner-ready teacher network, which consists of current teachers, school and district administrators, education advocacy group members, and representatives from institutions of higher education. So if you know what's happening in the college level, if you've been paying attention at all, we've said it for years now, it's not just on the college campus, it's in your K-12 classrooms.
In other words, the new Illinois standards are saying, quote, don't allow your racism to keep you out of therapy designed to extirpate your whiteness. You have to kill off your whiteness if you're white. And if teachers don't enter such therapy voluntarily, the new standards will make it easy for schools to force them into therapeutic mitigation of their whiteness. Force them into mitigation of their whiteness. If you don't voluntarily do this, you can be forced into programs that will deprogram you away from being white, or you will lose your license. Complaints about a teacher's failure to embrace progressive perspectives or let go of Eurocentrism, say by assigning too many novels by white men in their English classes, could easily subject hapless educators to D'Angelo's cure for their whiteness. Licensure and certifications are at stake here. These new Illinois standards also mandate that teachers embrace ideas like systemic racism. As the standards put it, teachers must, quote, affirm that there are systems in our society that create and reinforce inequity, thereby creating oppressive conditions. You have to swear on to all of these, or you will not be allowed to teach.
And if you take a look at the bill, in their actual description for it, their reasoning is they say that statewide, 52% of public school children are non-white, yet only 17% of their teachers reflect this racial diversity. That is the sole thing they are going off of, because everything to them is about race. And if you're white and I'm black, I clearly can't learn a dang thing from you. And I can't learn anything from history about anyone who doesn't look exactly like me, because that's the only thing that we tend to do now, I guess with the exception of being transgender. But the focus that we have in our K-12 system is based solely on your race. And the other thing that I want to note from the bill is they had to answer the question about have there been any published studies, reports, sources of any data that was used to compose all this rulemaking? None. So they're going solely off of what they want to do.
83% of teachers are white, and that means 83% of teachers are racist. The implication is that if you're white and a teacher, you did that to oppress kids. You're not there to help them. You're not there to teach them. All you 83% of white teachers, all of you social justice warriors who actually think you're there to help minority kids, you're in the way. They would much rather you quit, walk away, and replace even completely incompetent teachers who happen to be not white. That would be more equitable. Kids would learn more from simply seeing an incompetent black teacher than they would from an award-winning white teacher. This is what they're telling you. The proposed Illinois standards also make it clear that students have to be both indoctrinated and pushed into progressive activism. It's not enough to be a progressive student. You have to demonstrate it through activism. Quote, be aware of the effects of power and privilege and the need for social advocacy and social action to better empower diverse students and communities. Leverage student activism by being a teacher who promotes student activism and advocacy in class. Again, given the mandate, quote, to embrace and encourage simply, exclusively progressive viewpoints. The content of this activism is clear. Teachers are also encouraged to substitute social justice work for actual study tests and exams. Let kids get grades based on their advocacy in their communities over what they actually learn in the classroom.
Well, it makes perfect sense, because if you look at the bill, there are subsections and then subsections and all these bullet points. Dr. Duke's just hitting on a couple of them, and there are just many of them to look through. But the very first one that they talk about with you being a teacher, in basically understanding your self-awareness in this, is to understand and value the notion that multiple lived experiences exist, that there is not one correct way of doing or understanding something, and that what is seen as correct is most often based on our lived experiences. So clearly nothing is wrong. Anything you can do is nothing's wrong if it's your lived experience,
unless
but nothing's right if there you
and then if you're white, there's nothing you could do that's not wrong.
Exactly.
Look, if there were justice in the world and teachers were paying attention, 83% of white teachers would walk away in protest of this. Even if it was just in the state of Illinois, you would walk away. And you know what they'd say? They would call you racist for walking away. Even as they say, you stay, you're racist. So this is what they think of you. Hey, white teachers, 83% of the teaching population of this country, they think you're bigots and racists. They hate you. They don't want you there. They're going to break you. If you agree to stay in the school system, they're going to break you down until you're nothing but a brainwashed, whiny little apologist for what you stand for. And if you don't realize from these standards in Illinois, these proposed standards, that they don't want you teaching anything, that this is not about school anymore, then I guess you get what you deserve coming down the road.
So it took all of one day of Black History Month, and the teachers decided to screw the pooch. Day one.
Poor pooch.
Poor pooch. The Sun Prairie Area School District in good old Wisconsin, Sun Prairie, just say it's near Madison, Wisconsin. Sun Prairie Area School District had to suspend a small group, they're saying. They wouldn't name, but a small group of teachers who decided that they would ask sixth grade students, so 11 and 12-year-olds, how they would punish slaves. At the Patrick Marsh Middle School, students were doing a remote learning exercise and were given an assignment that asked how they would punish a slave who disrespected his master. You can see there's the wording. A slave stands before you. This slave has disrespected his master by telling him, "You are not my master." How will you punish this slave? And then you're supposed to write your decision in the little red box there. And then on the bottom there, it actually gives you, like, it cites Hammurabi's code and states that, back in those times, they would be put to death. It's kind of like hint, hint, wink, wink. Or wink, wink, hint, hint.
It's a sad commentary that the only way you would ever find Hammurabi's name in a modern public school system is to promote slavery.
Hey, I would like to give a shout out to one of my fellow teacher cohort people from school. She actually did a whole unit on it. So good job, Heidi.
That was 50 years ago.
It was not 50 years ago.
We're talking now. And look,
How
go back
old
to
are
that.
you?
Go back to that little exercise for a second. With all due respect, they are dealing with slaves. What we just showed you in the first segment about these culturally responsible standards, you're treating white teachers like they're slaves. You literally are projecting a slave existence on your teachers, aren't you? I mean, you're telling them that their very existence is wrong. All because of their skin color. You're telling these white teachers that they cannot be who they are without being hateful and vicious to the people that are around them. You have literally transformed slavery onto these teachers in terms, maybe not in terms of their salaries or in terms of locking them up at night, but certainly in your attitude toward their skin color, attitude toward who they are.
And on top of it, to make matters even worse, this lesson, the exact wording from this lesson was found on Teachers Pay Teachers.
Yes.
It was a $4 lesson. If you don't know what Teachers Pay Teachers, it's basically a website where teachers can upload material like this. So a teacher made that, him or herself, whatever.
Let somebody else do your work for you.
Yeah, and you can upload it. Hey, it's a good way to make a little side hustle there for the teachers. See, they're making all sorts of money. But someone actually decided, I'm going to pay that $4 for that lesson, give it out to my students, and then now get suspended. Patrick Marsh Middle School Principal Rebecca Zahn and the Associate Principal Amy Schernecker issued a joint statement following the controversy and said the assignment was intended to help students understand how order was kept in the early civilization, how the laws that were developed, and how unjust they were. Anyway, there was another joint statement. We're giving out joint statements. People are getting suspended in groups. No one can do anything by themselves anymore. Patrick Marsh Middle School Superintendent Brad Sarin, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Equity, Stephanie Leonard Whitty, and Assistant Superintendent for Operations Janet Rossetter said, we are writing today to apologize for a grave error in judgment that occurred during 6th grade social studies and instruction at Patrick Marsh Middle School. A small group of teachers developed and used an activity that was neither racially conscious nor aligned to our district mission, vision, values, curriculum, or district equity statement. Once we learned of this activity, we immediately stopped. We stopped it, so we did our job. We're covering our asses right now. Further teaching of the lesson and promptly began an investigation. And in our preliminary findings, we have determined the lesson was not a part of our district curriculum, and therefore, no student should participate in or complete the assignment. Oh, thanks. And then they concluded, because this is all just, I love reading all the, administrative speak. It's great. To be clear, this lesson is not consistent with the school board's vision for this school district, our commitment to equity and cultural responsiveness, or the development opportunities we have invested in our staff.
And the irony is that they are objecting to the assignment for the wrong reasons.
Of course.
They think that this is going to offend black people. They
really,
think that you're pulling African Americans, even though it's about Hammurabi, thousands of years before the first white man enslaved the first black man, when people in Europe and Africa were enslaving each other.
What?
Shh, don't talk about that.
Huh?
The fact remains that they're angry because black people are going to be offended. The whole concept of treating people like slaves we know it doesn't bother them because, again, see the first story we did for today's episode.
Well, we're all about equality here at the Dr. Duke Show, and equity and all of the E words. And so in the name of equality, let's talk about Joe Biden's Justice Department, which decided it would drop an investigation into Yale University, the Ivy League of Yale, regarding the university's discriminatory admissions process. It's those white kids again, isn't it? Wrong you'd be if you just said that. It's actually with the Asian American students. The Justice Department had concluded that the university had discriminated against applicants based on race, but it was against those Asians. And so I guess they just don't care.
So let me get this clear. The racist Donald Trump
Yes.
that shattering racist nonce, Donald Trump, was actually using the power of government to defend racial minorities against discrimination. In this case, Asians, right?
Okay,
Asians who were being discriminated about Yale. Too many Asians did too well on math. Can't have that in a world where blacks and Hispanics don't do well. So we're going to punish those Asian kids in a university. And that racist Donald Trump was using the power of government to try to defend and protect minorities from this kind of academic bigotry. What's one of the first things Joe Biden decides to do? Screw you, Asians. Screw you.
Kind of said like that, sure. Well, this filing was with the federal district court in Connecticut, and it said it's dropping a Trump-era investigation
Racist!
into Yale for alleged racial discrimination in its admission process. And now a judge must sign off on this decision, and this was a 2-year investigation. All right, a 2-year probe.
All the money's already spent.
They did it. And by the by, previous Department of Justice activity had concluded that Yale had discriminated against Asian and white applicants. And
Well,
whites in
we
there
don't care about
in
the-
favor of racially favored applicants, a la blacks and Hispanic students.
Yeah, look at the number there. Look at the number of black and then Hispanic kids. These are the ones, by the way, that our NAEP scores show us clearly don't read well, don't do math well, but they're Yale worthy.
Yeah, so the Washington Free Beacon actually did an analysis on this, and they found that black students were 5 to 8 times more likely, and Hispanics were 2 to 4 times more likely to be admitted to Yale than their white and Asian counterparts with similar academic achievements. As you can see, if all things they're all starting at the same line there, who's actually getting in? The black students, and then the Hispanic students, and then
the typical liberal progressive moron, which is to say all of them, looks at that chart again, Mike, and what's the one takeaway? White people are getting in over Asians. That's what the liberal progressive sees, right? How white privilege is allowing them to go to school more than Asians. Forget the rest of it. That's all our narrow-minded, ignorant, race-obsessed liberals would see.
Yeah, basically.
Including sleepy Joe Biden.
This is true. And back in August of 2020, so, still Trump time. So we can't take anything that happened during that time at all. We just must cancel it. But during that time, the Justice Department had actually said, for at least 50 years, defendant Yale University has intentionally subjected applicants to Yale College to discrimination on the grounds of race and national origin. For the last few decades, Yale's oversized, standardless, intentional use of race has subjected domestic, non-transfer applicants to Yale College to discrimination on the ground of race.
Yeah, and of course, 50 years ago, that was Jews, right, that they were freezing out. Way to go, Jay. Way to go. Not only are you anti-Semitic morons going back 50 years at Yale, but now you're discriminating against the one demographic in this entire country who takes math seriously. Wonderful. You deserve something, Yale. I don't know what it is. But look, aren't we so lucky to have Joe Biden? And no one's going to call Joe Biden a racist for this. They're going to call him a racial hero. No one's going to, there will be no Charlotte protests. I mean, all that was completely debunked under the Trump administration. Trump never said there were good people on both sides. Go back and look at the tape. No, but you got a situation here where Joe Biden is actually doing something that has already been paid for, already been demonstrated. He's just killing it so nothing can happen to poor Yale University, who keeps discriminating against minorities like Asians.
It's time for some real education. Charles I was the second Stuart King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. He reigned from 1625 until he was beheaded by Cromwell in 1649. His father was King James VI of Scotland, who became King James I of England in 1603. In 1632, Charles named Anthony van Dyck, the great Flemish Baroque master, as his principal court painter.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's one of the most famous painters of all of European history, becomes the court painter retainer to Charles I of England, the second Stuart monarch, following his father James. And if you take a look at the picture here, you can. This is one of the works we're dealing with. This is Charles I with Monsieur de Saint-Antoine. It's an oil painting on canvas by the Flemish master painter Anthony van Dyck. It depicts Charles I on horseback, accompanied by his riding master, Pierre-Antoine Bourdon, Seigneur de Saint-Antoine. This portrait is dated 1633 and was the first equestrian portrait of Charles that Van Dyck painted. And there's some really interesting things here. It currently hangs in Buckingham Palace. Notice how Charles, who was an indecisive man, kind of a frail man, in many ways he didn't have that kingly timber. It's one of the reasons why he was ultimately removed. But here he's depicted as a chivalrous knight and a sovereign riding a large muscular white horse. This is the 20th century equivalent of the red Camaro, right? Try to make the middle-aged, ineffective, wimpy guy look a little more manly. Well, you put him behind the wheel of a Corvette, right? In this case, you put him on the back of a hugely muscled stallion, probably a Lipizzan stallion, one of those wonderful horses, under a neoclassical triumphal arch, as a way of trying to suggest, no, seriously, he is a king. He is a king. You see the shield of arms there on the left. You have him dwarfing the figure of his horse master, the horse master who's actually walking, so that Charles can be seen as kingly. So what does this tell us? What does this painting tell us about power and position? It tells us that art always has had propaganda uses, that it's always been possible for artists to prop up weak rulers or to alter reality just enough to confer power and potency to cover up impotency. And that's the case of Charles. There was very little that could be done, though, in Charles's case. As the interregnum went forward, Charles was going to be beheaded. The Puritans took over for a period of time there, and it was interesting, to say the least. Charles became the first the first English king to be beheaded that way, theoretically by the people of England. It struck a major blow against the divine right of kings theory, which almost all previous English kings believed in, that they had been set up by God and therefore no human beings could remove them. Well, a nice blow to the neck, and Charles was removed by his own people. And as grisly a time as it was, it does remind us of something very useful, that we need to remember it as we go about deifying presidents like Obama and Biden just because they're not Donald Trump. There is no divine right of kings. There is no divine right of presidents. Just because you have a D before your name, whether you're Obama or Biden, doesn't mean, as we just saw in the last segment, doesn't mean you can't be the biggest racist out there or the most impotent mom jean wearing president in the history of the republic.
All right, if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we're going to send you our signature tumbler. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. And just a reminder to please download our brand new Freedom Project Media app on your smart device. By doing so, you're going to be able to watch all of our videos, including our 4-part lecture series entitled Universities, History, Purpose, and Politics, hosted by the one and only Dr. Duke. You also get access to our other lectures, weekly shows, in-depth interviews, educational animations, just the list goes on and on. Simply search Freedom Project wherever you download apps and make sure, please, to allow for the notifications.
And you heard her right. For one $99 donation, tax deductible, you and I can put on some Barry White. Sit there in a low lit room and we can tumble together. Are you ready to tumble with me, baby? Now make sure you go download the Freedom Project app. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay cozy, my friends. I'm gonna bring my tumbler over to your house. We're gonna have a party.